Hello world! It has been a very long time since I've made any kind of video, mostly because I've been busy planting things. I am hanging out in West Virginia right now. There are many plants behind me. If anybody is in the region and wants a blueberry plant, or I have a lot of pawpaw trees, a lot of chestnut trees, what else is back there? A lot of American plum. I have lots of things. And you want some trees, let me know. Happy to hook you up. I've had a long-standing, and by long-standing I really mean since childhood, abiding passion for gardening and for planting. And it is the primary reason that I wanted to move to this area to begin with. And it wasn't specifically about the area, it was just about having some space to do this kind of thing. So I'm very passionate about planting stuff, particularly about following permaculture principles, which I've talked about elsewhere, and I'm happy to talk about perhaps in another video, if and when I can get around to making one. But I wanted to talk about a topic, and I started to write about it, and I get so ego-trapped when I write about things, and my perfectionistic tendencies assert themselves more when I'm writing than they do if I just do kind of a stream of consciousness video. It's easier for me to discuss a topic off the cuff in a video format, so I really should make more videos, but I just have been out of the habit. So, long story, I started to write about it and then realized, you know what, I'll just talk about it on video because it's easier to do. The topic is community, finding community, building community, finding your tribe, making friendships, finding coalition as an adult. This is by far the number one thing that when I have consults with people that they are asking about and concerned about, particularly in a post-COVID world and increasingly online virtual world, and also a more polarized world where people are running into greater trouble finding common ground with other people, politically, ideologically, interpersonally. A lot of people have had friendships and relationships, whether with old friends, families, romantic relationships. They've come under a lot of stress in the past few years. Kind of started with Trump, has moved into the COVID era, and at this point, I think most of us, to some degree or another, feel pretty isolated, kind of in our bubbles with people who get us, at least as much as can be possible within the range of who we know. But most people I talk to, pretty much universally, are feeling that's not enough. They're feeling a sense of missing community, and it's really profound, and it's really affecting people's well-being. So I've been talking about this a lot. It comes up constantly in consults. It comes up constantly in the virtual communities that I've created. I have two. I have one that's every Saturday night I call the Virtual Village. It's a Zoom group with anyone who wants to join and talk about current events, evolutionary psychology, whatever. Everything from food to UFOs in that group. And then I also have a women's version of that group that is on Sunday evening, so ladies only. And that tends to be a little more relationship focused, body image, weight, pleasure trap, family, etc. But not always. They kind of can share content. So that's been my stab at creating community, and also the seminar series that Dr. Lyle and I are doing, the True to Life series. I'll put that link below. That's actually building a real life community of people with shared interest and a shared evolutionary perspective on the world. So we've been trying to solve this problem in the sort of clunky ways that seem obvious to us. And, when I talk to people about it, and when I think about it for myself, because I'm struggling with it too, it's, well, fish where the fish are. Same idea as with dating. You're not going to meet friends and find coalition unless you're putting yourself out there, unless you're, if you have any spiritual or religious inclinations, finding a faith community, getting involved in volunteer projects, going out and working on community gardening projects, volunteering at the local shelter to walk dogs. All of these kinds of things are possibly, potentially going to put you in touch with other people who share your values and could be a meaningful connection for you. But that has felt like not quite enough. It's sort of similar to control your environment to stay out of the pleasure trap. It's necessary but not sufficient. It'll get you part of the way to solving the issue, but it doesn't contain the special sauce of really making it happen. And I had a breakthrough about this very recently because I was thinking how hard it is to find overlap politically, morally, religiously, ideologically. Where is your tribe who is just like you? It doesn't exist. You are a tribe of one. And so you may find people who are very common, very, very aligned with you on some things, very divergent from you on other things. And you do your best to square the circle and to kind of take the good with the bad. But it doesn't, it feels edgy. It's not a perfect alignment. And we get choosier as we get older about who we make relationships with, any type of relationship. So it's one thing when you're 12 years old and you're in middle school and your best friend is the person in your class that you just have the most in common with, that you don't really have a choice about it. But in the adult friendship market, it's similar to the dating market, where you have, in principle, infinite possibilities, particularly when you can make virtual connections. And I think most people have this intuition to look very specifically, more and more narrowly, to find the people who are most like them, because the people who are most like them are going to possibly be the richest soil for friendships and for community. And this can work, but I don't think it's the only way. So I started thinking about times that I have felt deeply connected with other people with whom I had very little in common, or even was antagonistic with politically, religiously, etc. And that has happened, more than a few times in my life, including with extended family. I've had moments of feeling part of a community really solidly in connection with other humans that I didn't on paper have things in common with. And I realized the common denominator in those experiences is generally, doesn't have to be, but in my case has been music. Now, I am not a particularly musical person. I love music. I enjoy music. I love to sing in the car. I love to listen to music. I don't create music very effectively. I come from a very musical family. My brother has made it his life and vocation. And my father was an incredible instinctual performer and, could pick up an instrument and pick out a song and just had the ear for it. And I just don't have the gift that they have, but I have the passion for it. And I certainly, whenever possible, am going to be listening to music. And this occurred to me in the context of something else that I've been thinking a great deal about, which is the work of Ian McGilchrist. So Ian McGilchrist is a psychiatrist and general polymath who lives actually on the Isle of Skye, which I am very covetous of his living situation. But he has written a couple of books, a couple of really remarkable books. The first among them called The Master and His Emissary. The most recent is called The Matter with Things. And they are both very well worth reading. They are both tomes. They're both very long. Master and His Emissary is maybe a little bit shorter. Matter with Things is actually a 2-part volume. It will do great injury to McGilchrist to try to summarize his work in a video like this, because it is so incredibly nuanced and he is so deep in so many parts of this question. But to sketch necessarily simplistic caricature of it, he's interested in the division of hemispheres in the brain. And he is the first to say, forget everything cartoonish that you know about what the left and right hemispheres of the brain are about. It's all the sort of pop culture associations. The left is rational and, about language, and the right is imagination and creativity, and the left is masculine and the right is feminine. It's all bullshit, at least the way that it is popularly conceived. It's not about what the hemispheres do, because everything we do involves both hemispheres: language, emotion, creativity. It's, the whole brain is involved in everything that we do. But it's a matter of how. It's a matter of how, and the word that he uses is how the halves of the brain attend to the question and to the situation. And they have very different ways of attending to things. And he paints this very, very interesting picture of how Western civilization has moved into, necessarily so because of the whole civilization thing, which requires more bureaucratization and more labeling and more putting things in boxes and putting things in categories, more of a left brain way of attending to the world, and that this has kind of seeped into our very existence in the way that we see ourselves as humans, the way that we see the world, what we expect from other people. It's a very rich and nuanced argument, and I'm giving you just the very top level version of it, which makes it sound more simplistic than it is. So I recommend reading the book. But the takeaway, and the reason that I'm bringing it up, is it has gotten me to a place where I've been trying to think of ways that I can engage my right brain way of attending more in the world. One of the points that he makes is that as civilization pushes us into a more orderly way of existing, we are more prone to left brain bias, and the things that connect us to a right brain paradigm or a right brain experience of the world are things that we're increasingly alienated from. The very things that we have lost in the modern environment are the exact things that connect us to a right hemisphere experience: music, art, nature, poetry, dance, beautiful architecture, etc. Nature being paramount. So up until extremely recently, human beings spent their lives immersed in a natural environment, beholden to natural cycles, to natural light, to natural rhythms of seasons, very in touch with what is happening out as within. And we are living this really incredibly, amazingly, unprecedentedly, not sure that's a word, but we're going to make it a word, disconnected existence that serves to just shut nature out, to numb ourselves from the natural environment. To anything unpleasant about it gets kind of contained and controlled and pushed away. We defend against it however we can. We insulate and isolate ourselves from nature, and that applies even to those of us who sort of deliberately get out into it on occasion, and enjoy what nature has to offer. We are still not experiencing it at anything like, it's nothing like a true wilderness experience for most people most of the time. Maybe a few of us have had a true wilderness experience once or twice in our lives, but we had to seek it out. We never feel the terror and the awe of a natural environment that would have been fundamental to human association and to the human experience. And all of these other things, all of the other things that get you into a sense of feeling that you are connected to something bigger than yourself. The left hemisphere is very insular. It knows what it knows. It's very serious about what it knows. The reason he calls his first book The Master and His Emissary is this metaphor of some sort of general in war who, or some sort of administrator of a political entity who cannot know everything that is going on all at granular levels of detail in their kingdom, and so sends out emissaries to get information and to come back and to report, and so that can be integrated into the design of the political scheme to improve life for everyone, or to win the war, or whatever we're up to. So the idea is that the master is in charge, and the emissaries are very good servants, very good agents of information, but they don't have the full picture. Their task and their job and their role is to go collect information, kind of free of the big context, because they don't have access to the big context. They don't know what the other emissary over here has found out and how that connects to the plan that is over here, and etc. But the master does, and the master relies on clear and transparent and consistent information coming from these dispatches. But when you have an emissary who goes rogue, who decides that they have the on the ground information and that they can be in charge, they push the master out, and they there's mutiny of the servant to his master. And for McGilchrist, this analogizes to the right brain being the master, the left brain being the emissary, where the left brain makes an excellent servant but a very poor master. I have a dog over there who really wants a belly rub. So anyway, as is typical when I make videos, I'm just going off on a million tangents. But it's a really fascinating book. His work in general is very fascinating. But I have been very consciously thinking, how can I put myself into a right hemisphere way of attending to the world? How can I increase the amount of time in my life that I am getting out of that categorical it's not a matter of being rational or being logical, because those are actually not the domain exclusively of the left brain. The right hemisphere is just as rational. It's just as reasonable. It sees a bigger picture. It has more information, and he has incredible stories, especially comparing people who have had left versus right brain strokes, and how they are affected very differently. So people who lose capacity in the left hemisphere, they really lose their language ability, their ability to speak, their ability to kind of, they look like they're worse off. They look like they're functioning in a much more poor way compared to somebody who's lost their right brain function, and they seem completely normal and able to continue, but might be much more angry, might be much more reactive. Kind of, it's almost, if you wanted to kind of characterize it very simply, like they get a little more autistic. They get a little more, things become more linear. They lose nuance. They lose humor. They lose, the ability to make broader inferences about statements that are made. One of the examples he uses, if you come into a room and you say, wow, it's really hot in here, someone who has right brain online functionality will kind of take that and be like, yeah, you're right. We should open a window. We should turn on the AC. We should, do something about it. Whereas somebody who doesn't have that capacity is sort of confused. Why are you making a meteorological report how is this relevant? Like, yes, it's hot in here. Okay. So these are the differences. All of this to say, I've been actively seeking out these types of engagements. So more time in nature, more time planting things, more time offline, more time disconnected, more time with my phone off and away from a computer and reading actual books. And it's even extended to things like, instead of listening to podcasts, certainly fear-mongering podcasts, which I was doing some of during the peak of the pandemic, and it's just psychologically a bad idea for me and probably for most people. Instead of listening to those things when I drive, I listen to music, particularly music that I can sing along with. And as my little N of one experiment, there is a real subjective difference in my mood, in my well-being, in my tolerance for other idiotic drivers on the road. It's a very different experience if I am driving along happily singing to something that I really enjoy and feeling united with the artist in this performance, versus I'm listening to a podcast that is getting me into a really scarcity-driven, fear-mongering kind of space, or even just a very highly abstract, language-driven evolutionary psychology podcast or something like that. Anything that's got me in a more sort of rigid, categorical frame of mind is going to make me more fragile and vulnerable to insults from life, even in that type of experience and throughout the day. So I've observed that in myself. And then I had the remembering that I have felt deeply connected with people I actually don't even like very much, and also total strangers, in moments of musical exaltation or dance. And, to some degree also beholding beautiful art and being in awe of a natural phenomenon. Those things will do it as well. But I think music is particularly powerful. It's a particularly powerful modality. And all of us have capacity to make music, even if we are not very musical. So all of us can sing, even if we don't believe that we can sing very well, or we sing off key. we still sing, we still feel an instinct to sing. All of us can dance, even if we, are off rhythm and wouldn't want to dance in a performative way with other people who could see us. I think connecting to these things is deeply, deeply important. And when you look into it, you find that music and dance, and this is a subject of some contention in the evolutionary literature, but there are a lot of people who argue that music came before language, or at least co-evolved with it. And so we had the ability to make language long before we started using language as a species. And the conclusion of a lot of researchers, including Robin Dunbar, is that was used to make musical sounds, to sing as labor was being done, to sing to children, to look for a response if there was not a response to the engagement from music with children. We all, most of us, have an instinct to speak in baby talk to children, or in a more musical sort of way. And there's research that indicates that could have been a sort of like health check of the baby. Is this baby responding? Is there something wrong with it? So there are all kinds of interesting little rabbit holes associated with this. McGilchrist himself, I think in The Master and His Emissary, looks at the argument that music came well after language as a sexual display, i.e. a Geoffrey Miller type argument. And he discounts it. He says that, there's plenty of evidence to dispute that, despite what we might call the, quote, Tom Jones argument, which I found amusing. Whether you agree with Dunbar or Miller, or you're somewhere in between, I don't think it matters too much. I think it's obvious and inescapable that music is a key piece of the human experience, and has been for a very long time, at least as long as language has been, if not before. And so has dance, and dance and music are connected to each other. And so has a ritualized connection to source, to spirit, to God or gods. You're going to find a sort of spiritual inclination in every collective society that exists and has ever existed on planet Earth, this sort of religious instinct that people have. And you see it in children as well. Children have a very musical, very likely to start dancing when they hear music, very unself-conscious about it, and have a sort of animistic intuition about the world in most cases. So they see the world as alive. They have imaginary friends. The natural world talks to them. They assume if they see an animal in the woods that it has a personality, it has a consciousness that is engaging with them. They are very imaginative in ascribing these qualities to the world around them, and to the conscious entities around them, and to entities that we might not immediately recognize as conscious, but may perhaps be in ways that we just cannot perceive, and certainly cannot perceive through a primarily left hemisphere dominated worldview. And so that's a whole other conversation. I would point people to Donald Hoffman's work, although he doesn't go fully down this particular rabbit hole. He points at it and suggests as much, that sort of everything is a portal to what he calls a conscious agent, and that consciousness is primary to space and time, and space and time is a phenomenon of consciousness, etc. So that's very interesting reading if you want to go down that road. But I would say most children have a feeling that inanimate things around them are not as inanimate as the adults around them perceive them as. And we say this is childhood imagination, and that they're playing make-believe, and they are, but they are also dwelling in a much more right hemisphere dominant space. And so, McGilchrist takes great pains throughout all of his work to get away from any kind of value judgment. It's not that it is, being in the left hemisphere is bad, and being in the right hemisphere is the way to go, and we need to change that, or we need to do lobotomies or something. He is making very clear that both ways of attending to the world are incredibly necessary, but that when you throw them out of balance, you get problems, and that we are very out of balance, and really as a species have never been more out of balance for a number of reasons, including our alienation from the natural world. The idea here is that certainly through music or through dance, I have done something called ecstatic dance a few times, which is a similar sort of, music is very much a part of it, where you find yourself in a room with a bunch of sweaty strangers. It sounds sort of like a scuzzy meat market kind of thing, and it's not. It's actually, pretty much everyone who's there is there to have this kind of spiritual experience of feeling deeply connected to other people, where you just engage in free movement to the music. And it's usually some kind of like techno rave music. It doesn't have to be, it can be new agey, and there are many different ways of doing this. But I will tell you, there is a feeling that there's that unique feeling of being connected with other humans who are moving and in sync to a musical rhythm, is something that cannot be replicated in daily modern Western life. And it is something we actually spend a great deal of time shutting ourselves off from. And I believe that this is the X factor. This is the missing. We're trying to connect with people based on left-brained models of the world, left-brained based categorical sets of data about how we have things in common, and therefore we should be friends, and we should like each other and engage in the same sort of behaviors together, when really we should be, to some degree, setting that aside and privileging the thing that is bigger than us to connect us to other people, and that is going to be jointly participating in something that is bigger than the two parties involved or the multiple parties involved. And this can be a church service. Church services all include sort of devotional singing and chanting and prayer and hymnals. And these are the things that we have lost that have actually allowed us to feel in connection with other humans. Like, we're sitting here going, why is it so hard for me to connect with other people when I'm on my phone and I'm isolated in a little suburban house where you don't see other people deliberately in community for any significant amount of time on a regular basis? Maybe the only way that you are seeing other people is maybe at work, although a lot of people are not even having that experience anymore. They're working remotely. Maybe through kids. Maybe you have kids who are connecting with other kids. But most of the people I talk to are people with adult kids out of the house who are just living profoundly lonely lives. They feel really coalition deficient. And I have a very strong intuition that this is the way to find that community. I think about times that I've spent with extended family members, second and eighth cousins, 3 times removed, or whatever it is. These are people that I don't have much in common with. Despite sort of having a shared geographical identity, we have not spent much time together past very early childhood. We've gone on very different paths in life. We probably don't share a lot in common politically, ethically. Nobody in there is vegan, etc. However, when I have been compelled to spend time with those people, usually for a family event, a family wedding, a family funeral, a family anniversary, like some landmark type celebration, there's usually jam sessions that happen because there's a musical tendency that extends through a lot of my family members. There was a beeping Instant Pot if anybody wants to come over for chickpeas. And in the middle of a jam session where everybody is just playing and singing to the best of their abilities, and some people are very, very talented, and some people are not, and some people are, just average, just, able to kind of hold a beat and like slap a tambourine or something. There is a feeling that overcomes you where it's devotional. There's no other word for it. There is a feeling of devotional connection within a group, and it is uplifting, and it is a balm for the soul, and it is something that, again, until very recently, we all had in at least a weekly church service. It was also something that we all experienced in our homes as a way of entertaining ourselves, particularly through long winters, or just when the work was done for the day. You make music, you sing songs, even if it's the same songs that you've been singing forever. You tell stories, you entertain each other. This is the kind of notion that we have of sitting around the campfire at the end of the day in the apocryphal hunter-gatherer society, where there is this coming together and a sharing of something bigger. So there's food, there's music, there's dance. There is connection beyond, well, what do you think of the latest trending topics on Twitter? And if we disagree, we have no common ground, and therefore we have to go our separate ways and we have no coalition. That's a separate question. It's a separate question of whether your coalition with other people is, something you want to pursue in your sort of average day-to-day left hemisphere existence. But the what people are craving, what people are wanting, is a feeling of deep connection with fellow humanity. And that requires a whole different approach that privileges connection with right hemisphere activity, music, art, dance. And all of us who have been to a musical performance, to a concert of any type, have felt this sense, have felt you were suddenly best friends with the people who were dancing next to you in the audience of a good band or a good performance of any type. There is a feeling of community and solidarity that overcomes you and glosses over whatever differences may exist between you and this stranger who is sitting next to you. The most powerful experience I have had of that is call and response kirtan music, which builds to this crescendo, involves movement, involves singing back to it's sort of this. We were spared from an even longer video because I just had a very West Virginian experience of a neighbor stop by, pull up the driveway, and ask if I wanted a kitten. He has a litter of kittens. Very tempting, but probably not today. So anyway, I think this is the answer, and I think there are different ways to do it, but primarily I would seek out opportunities to jam and to attend musical events and to a slightly lesser degree to be in community, in commune with other people in the natural environment. I think that's another beautiful way to do it. But I do think something that allows you to completely forget yourself, the self, the ego, the desires, the self-consciousness, everything about us that is engaged in impression management when we are dealing with other people, what they think about us, how do they think we look? Are we attracted to them? Are they attracted to us? Are they impressed by what we are saying? Am I going to share a certain view of the world or political idea with them? How are they going to react to it? I mean, we are just running at 100 RPM all the time, kind of thinking all of these things. And I think it is necessary to get into some kind of activity that allows you to abandon that. But I think think music is the best. And I want to stress that this does not require being musically talented or proficient in any particular instrument. I think this is an instinct and a talent that everyone has, whether they're going to get a record contract or not. It is something that is born into you as a member of the human species, and we should be leveraging it because I think it is an important portal to the communitarian spirit that we are sorely, sorely lacking and missing in our modern existence, on top of all of the other things that we are sorely lacking and missing in our modern existence. But this is one we can do something about. So I think that does it. It probably would have gone even longer if I hadn't been interrupted by the kitten man, so we should all be grateful to him. I will try to be back here and make more videos. Like I said, it's a more right brain stream of consciousness kind of process for me. If there are things that people would like to talk about, hear about, particularly that are outside of the kind of typical Q&As that we do, and that are more adjacent to this kind of broadening the scope type space that I find myself in lately, I'm very open to that and happy to do it. And now the computer keeps randomly shutting down the video on me, which is another indication from the universe that I need to wrap it up. So I was going to say a bunch more stuff. Not going to do it. We will just conclude. So please let me know what you'd like to hear about. Okay, it did it again. Goodbye. Talk to you soon. Bye.